See, Nick, you're getting fired up. Nick, it is Niko, and it is John. So, hi, Niko. What's going on, man?
Hey, what's going on, Atlanta? Happy to be here with you guys. Second cup of coffee.
I was going to say.
That's right. Just the end of the transfer window. We'll probably hear a lot of announcements here after the fact, right? Because their teams don't have to announce all their signings. We've seen that over and over again, not to mention free transfers and things like that. But excited to be here with you guys. Crazy Leagues Cup yesterday as well. Messi continues to wreck the entire CONCACAF, and yeah, it's been interesting.
All right, so Nick, do you want to start with, as Ricky Ricardo referred to Niko, our transfer shaman, who had Xande Silva and Niko Lobjanidze mentioned the day before the deal. He had Xande Silva and Lobjanidze mentioned, and it happened. So now Niko is now being referred to as our transfer shaman on the show. Nick, do you want to? Do you want to start with Inter Messi, or do you want to start with transfers, Nick? Where do you want to go first?
I want to talk about the transfers here because we have our own shams happening here. We have our our own Fabrizio Romano for MLS happening. I mean, you're elevating your game, Niko. I mean, you're being put into a stratosphere with the Titans at this point because you're scooping. You have everyone around going, okay, who does this man know where he's got his finger on the pulse of the transfers? Talk to us a bit about this.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been, honestly, it gets more difficult as time goes on, as more of the Tom Bogers and Fabricios and Merlos are around there and well connected as well. I'm someone that likes to get the information filtered to 3 at least points of references, making sure that it's not just something I'm throwing on the wall and see if it sticks. But this one came through, right? I mean, I had mentioned it last week in the show, being very cautious about the information. So when, Saba and Silva were the names that I had, and I was finally able to lock that down, get it to my last phase of confirmation. Then I went in and threw it out. I thought it was very interesting. To be quite honest, it has Garth Lagerwey feel to it. He did a lot of similar stuff down here. I don't want to take any credit from Boca because I'm sure he's part of everything. But the change of direction when it comes to Atlanta, going from those headliners of the best South American soccer player and spending 20 million to getting 3 or 4 players that might be cohesive with what they want to do here, that are going to be low risk, high reward, European players that maybe not a lot of your usual fans are following. It just feels like a very Garth Lagerwey thing. So it's been what I think it's been a very good change of direction for Atlanta. I know a lot of fans were upset and they were, kind of commenting on my initial tweet when I broke the news that this is embarrassing and I can't believe we're getting this, 27, 20-year-old players. Like, you've done the opposite in the past. This seems like a different take on direction, and I think you'd be surprised. Let this man cook because he knows what's up.
Well, it's like when they had Jeff Larentowicz, right? Oh, Jeff Larentowicz is over the hill. Like, well, we picked him up in expansion draft. Oh my God, he was just a stud, right? And Chris McCann was somebody who
exactly.
People like, who? And then he came in and he did really expensive work for us. I think that the rating of League Two is brilliant, right? And that's just my take on, because Argentina is getting so overfished now with European teams who are trying to be more cost efficient. You're competing now with AC Milan and Inter Milan going into for these Argentine prospects, going in and getting more established players. Over in Europe, even if you've never heard of them, keep in mind, not a lot of people heard of Joseph Martinez at Torino whenever that move happened. So it's, I mean, this isn't the first time Atlanta would have found success fishing in waters that a lot of people were scratching their heads with, right?
Yeah, and same goes for Gigi. I mean, when you look at all the press and all of the hype that a guy like Insigne came with to MLS, and then you look at a guy like Gigi that, hey, it's a transfer that we're trying to get, and he's a guy that he's a proven goal scorer, but there was no hype around it, and look what's been more productive. So
Yes.
like I said to many people, do you want to have headlines, do you want to win games? Because sometimes you can do both, but a lot of times if you're doing it the right way and you're building a roster to maximize his potential, you need some of these key components, those role players, specifically these guys like Saba and Silva, where they are versatile. They can play either side of that wing space. They're both good two-way players. When it comes to Saba, he's an international experienced player, playing in Europe in all kinds of championships. A player that, as I learn more about him, seems like he's got the respect of every single fan base. So those intangibles is something that was a thing here in Seattle when bringing in a player. Like the JPs, like the Emer Gomez Andrades, like the Rauls, the Nicolas Loderos, all those transfers that were made during the Garth era have those same similarities. So I think you guys would be surprised.
When it comes to the rest of the window, and I mean the ones that we know, here's what we know across the board, and we can get into winners and losers and individual transactions, however you want to play it. So this is from the league. After Toronto signed Cassius Mailula from South Africa, Inter Miami gets Facundo Farias. Montreal gets Fernando Alvarez, a defender from Pachuca. Crew got Rudy Camacho from Montreal. Red Bulls signed Juan Jose Mina, and they also signed another player this morning that we'll get into. Lucas Zelarayan to the Saudi Pro, which helped them get the money to free up to bring in Diego Rossi. Dynamo bring in Sebastian Kowalczyk. United signed Jamal Chiade. Shinyashiki had his contract mutually terminated. He's now over in Europe. NYCFC, Julian Fernandez from Vélez Sarsfield. That was an awful situation at Vélez, 25th out of 28th. You know that Fernandez is happy that he's out of there. St. Louis City acquires Anthony Markanich from Colorado. Diego Fagundes goes to LAG. RSL gets Brian Ojeda after the loan from Forest. Timbers acquired Brian Acosta from Colorado. Tomas Aviles to Inter Messi from Argentina. Yeda Yuronin, defender, comes from a French club. Silva, Ty Barabo from Israel. Then you have Veselinovic, who signs a contract extension. Saba, Timbers get a Brazilian winger, Anthony. Richie Larea fell down again and got re-signed by Vancouver from Nottingham Forest. We mentioned Rossi. Marcelino Moreno was in this morning. Red Bulls landing Jorge Cabezas Hurtado from Watford. So that's a mouthful for an end of the year run when it comes to the transfer window, my friend.
It's been amazing. It's only been interesting how everything's happened, and you haven't even talked about one that I think is very interesting. Everything that happened in Columbus, which is Diego Rossi to Columbus. That obviously I don't know if it's been announced officially yet, but then the fact that it had to do with Salarajanas leaving. And I'm curious to see if that really is going to pay off, because I feel like you were getting another wing and another great player, but who's going to facilitate right behind those players? Is that going to take away from Cucho having to track back a little bit more? I thought what they had was working. So bringing a guy like Rossi, yes, it's fun. It's interesting, and it could potentially give you a stellar attack, but it could also set you back if nobody's giving you services, nobody's facilitating the ball. But to your question, I think Red Bulls has done a really good job. I think Mina's going to be very high profile, high ceiling, constant player, someone that you can have for 3 years, 5 years if you like, or you could have him for 1 or 2 and then sell him out. Not the Red Bulls way. So I'm thinking he's going to be there for a while, grow, get better, solidify himself. I think Hurtado's another player that's going to be very good for New York. Some transfers that I did not like: Diego Fagundes leaving Austin. to LA Galaxy. I think it does Austin a disservice for Memo, regardless of the extra money. Diego Fagundes has been a really important player for Austin, and you see it when he's on the field. There's a total different feel to this squad, not to mention the relationship with the fan base, and a fan base that can relate to a player like that. I honestly don't think they're getting a better player in Memo, and the rest of the transfer money will tell you that they're adding on to sending Memo. So I think the LA Galaxy get a really good player, someone that's going to help that midfield, is going to give you a little bit more depth, that you might be able to even start him right next to Ricky, and you might give Ricky another associate in that midfield to continually get better, at least for the MLS, what's left of MLS play, right? They got knocked out of Leagues Cup, and you could see the reason behind that. Even in that game that they were bounced out of, they weren't able to make the knockout round. You can see that they really need that midfield to really work. Portland, I think getting Brian Acosta, I really like that move. Really like that move. You get yourself a veteran player, a guy that's proven in MLS, bringing in Anthony as a winger, add more depth in that part of the field as well. You already have Moreno. Evander's been killing it. You already have some options out wide with Jimmy when he's coming back. So I really feel like they very slowly have built up for the rest of the MLS season, not to mention Araujo and putting him back there, right? That's a Peruvian international with a lot of European games, with a lot of national team appearances. I think Portland is one of the big winners in this transfer window.
Nick, for Niko, go for it.
One of the things that you talked about earlier is that, the feeling of these are Garth's, like, they're Garth fingerprints on the signings, right? What are some hallmarks of a Garth Lagerwey signing? Because there were some times that you see, like, where a team will say, we want players who are, have tremendous pace and work ethic, right? Like, especially if you're one of these pressing teams, we need a player who's just all go, all gas. We need people who are maybe just got a bit of a hard edge to them. What is the hallmark Garth Lagerwey signing?
So that's a fantastic question. And the thing about Garth is that he continues to grow, he continues to develop, but there are a few things that he did here in Seattle that I know for a fact, after talking to him many a times throughout the time he was here. He likes players that are proven. He likes players that come with the right intangibles. He actually prefers players between 25 years old and 29, 30 years old at times, depending on where you can get those. I think if he's getting you a DP, he's going to be between 26-year-old and 29-year-old. And the reason is the level of maturity. You've already been able to track exactly what he's done in several teams. You've given a player the ability to have his ups and downs. They come with a different type of mindset. And not every DP and not every player you bring has to be one that you're going to turn around and sell and flip like a house. He wants someone that's going to come in and produce for several years because he's building his empire across players that can be pillars for not just 1 year, but 2 and 3. And when you bring players at that age group, that's when you can really get the best out of a player because they're trying to continue to play, get a better contract, and they're not looking to just be in a stepping stone into your club, but they're really trying to solidify themselves. And you're seeing that with some of these signings. But the intangibles is also one of the main components. They're going to be club players. They're going to be guys that are not going to be reckless and partying and all of these things. Garth is very cautious when it comes to that. And that's part of why he was so great down here. When it comes to stretching a little bit of that salary cap, he's going to get you a guy that might be a free agent, that might need a second chance. And that's another thing that you are seeing with some of the signings. So those are the things. However, Garth learns and Garth adapts, and he understands that Atlanta has a philosophy to flip and turn around players that are younger, that have done things. So don't be surprised if maybe the next window or at some point you get some of those players that you could bring in that they're pretty good, still kind of young, and you can flip out. Luis Abram, that's another player that I thought had the stamp of Guard Lagerway. He's very well connected in South America, very well connected in Peru. Again, I don't want to take away anything from Boca Negra, but just all these moves, including Luis Abram, those were, for me, moves that had that Guard Lagerway stamp.
All right, time to play red light, yellow light, green light this time. And you can even include in your red light, yellow light, green light, the way that we did it with John Morrissey talking USL Championship. But if you have a repeat performer than the one that was last week, you can come up with a different reason they can still be in that spot. And I will give you the caveat, sir, that you can include transfer deadline day transactions into your evaluation for red light, yellow light, green light. So players that came in, you can include them as to whether or not they're at the top, the middle, or the bottom of your stoplight. So where do you want to start? You want to start red and work your way down? You want to start green and work your way up?
Yeah, let's go red and then trending upward.
All right. So then
I'm gonna go red. I'm gonna go trending and just starting to get to red. And I'm only gonna use Leagues Cup stuff. To be quite honest, I'm not gonna bore you with anything else. I want to be as immediate information as possible. Yeah. So I'm gonna go with San Luis. They get bounced out of this cup. They I feel like they missed a shot. I'm not going to say that they're going to be red throughout MLS, but I think in this one, they had a really tough time. They haven't added any players. They've been exposed to be a one-trick pony. I really think that they really need to modify things and find a way to get out of that one-dimensional facet to their success. I was disappointed in their entire performance here in Leagues Cup. Again, I don't think that they're going to crumble to the point that they won't make the playoffs in MLS, but I think they miss a chance to just solidify themselves. I think had San Luis done things differently and maybe rotated against America and played their best 11 in that first game to try to get some points, things might have been a little bit different. So we'll start with that one. When it comes to yellow, in terms of what we've seen so far, I'm going to go Vancouver. They add Larea. I think that's an interesting one as well. They got rid of Gressel. They got rid of Gressel, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they got rid of Gressel.
He went to Columbus, yeah.
They went to Columbus. So when it comes to Vancouver, I think that they didn't play their best game against the LA Galaxy yesterday, but they have a lot of little factors beyond just their regular play. There's a lot of mental state there. Robbie Gould, I think, is a great leader in the field. You could tell that they have an identity of how do they like to play when it comes to transition. I think they're solid defensively. They're getting rid of a lot of dead weight. Caicedo's going to be leaving for Junior de Barranquilla in Colombia. So I feel like this team is really shredding the fat, getting some really good laborers and some really good talent when it comes to Larea, and they're getting ready to continue to do well in this Leagues Cup, but also for the end of the MLS season. Vancouver's a team to watch. They're very particular about the way they play. They're not exciting. They're not super entertaining, but they have a lot of ways to beat you. Sergio Cordova continues to find his way there. There's just a lot of firepower that not a lot of people might be able to see, but it's there for sure.
All right, so then that leaves us with the other light. So you mentioned red and you mentioned yellow. So then who's your green light?
Man, I was trying to decide if LAFC after that 7-1 beatdown that they put on Juarez, but I'm going to go with Columbus, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm still not sure about the whole Solarian thing. I'm really not. But if Nancy can figure out a way to make this work with Cucho, Rossi, Ramirez, the rest of that midfield with Nagby and Morris, and now you bring in Gressel that gives you a whole different component to that right side. You could play him a line back, at wing back. You could push him up a little bit higher. Fossey's already been doing really good, but now you get more depth. That defensive line that he's trying to kind of rotate there might be the only tinkering part of that team that might not be set in stone. But man, they really surprised me of how dominant they were against America. America's no slouch. America is one of the best teams in Mexico, one of the most respected. They have a really good squad this year, and they got beat down by Columbus. And that's not even with some of those new pieces coming in. So what does Columbus have? Fantastic coaching. They're a deep team. They have talent everywhere in the field. They got experience, very balanced when it comes to experienced players and new players. So, man, I take my hat off to Columbus Crew this season, the way they're building this roster, and that's what they're my green light, man.
Nick, for Niko, go for it.
Well, look, as far as Leagues Cup goes, outside of Miami, because they're playing Ultimate Team, and it sounds like you're very bullish on Columbus as well. Who else and is showing you something in Leagues Cup that it might be a little shocking to you on the positive side? Because for me, it was Orlando. Orlando showed me a little bit of the ability to hang, and I know that the Twitch pitch is going to kill me for saying anything remotely positive about the purple team. But for a little bit, until I think they got in their own head, it seemed like that they had stepped up their quality of play. Is there a team for you in Leagues Cup that on the positive side has shown you something that maybe you weren't expecting?
Yeah, man, I think it's the New York Red Bulls. I think that they had been a team that kind of had lost their way, and there was all of the issues with Dante Van Zier, and they let go of their coach. Obviously, you're kind of thinking it's going to be over. They didn't really seem to be a team that was adding a lot of talent, but in this League's Cup, they've been very good. And I know they just played Atlético San Luis, and they're not the greatest team in Mexico, but I like the resilience in this one. They lose control of the game a little bit in the first part of that second half. They let San Luis back in the game. Tolkien does a silly PK. You're thinking, man, San Luis is going to take the lead on this one, and it's going to be over because it was a 1-1 game. Coronel makes the save and gives Red Bulls a whole other boost. In 2-3 passes, Tolkien finds Van Zier up top. He kills it, puts it away. So the resiliency of this Red Bulls team, the core group in general that this team has been surprising because I didn't think they had it in them. Now they play New York City FC, a team that has been good, but I think has a lot of holes. So we'll see how far they get. But they've been the team that has been surprising. I could probably also add Chicago to that and Minnesota, because me and John have hit Minnesota pretty hard throughout this year.
That's true.
But it seems like Reynoso is really putting it all together down there. It seems like, again, everybody's behind Adrian Heath. So that's a couple of the other teams that have been surprising in this League's Cup.
A couple of other pieces of breaking news really quickly. You mentioned, obviously, that you didn't have to you could have your deals completed, didn't have to announce them by 1 o'clock Eastern time this morning. LA Galaxy have acquired forward Michael Barrios from Colorado Rapids. And Minnesota United have dipped back into the pool and picked up Jan Gregush. So those have been just released in the last couple of minutes from their respective clubs. Barrios is in exchange for the Galaxy's natural first-round pick in the 24 MLS Super Draft. Colorado could receive up to $50,000 in conditional 24 GAM if certain performance metrics are met. So basically, LAG gets Barrios for a song, a dance, and a soda.
Man, that's not bad. Michael Barrios is a guy that he's sneaky good. Like, he's not going to be a top leading scorer. He's not going to amaze you every single game, but he's still got that burst of speed. He's still going to put away 7-8 goals for you. He's going to be somebody that's going to be good for the locker room. You can tell him to play 10 minutes and he's going to kill for you for those 10 minutes. I've always liked him. I like his approach to the game. So that's an interesting one. And Goose is a good addition for Minnesota. Definitely someone that is also versatile and you could play it in different ways, and another veteran of this league. So yeah, it's interesting. But LA Galaxy, man, they've done a good job to fill holes up. Is it going to be enough in this Western Conference? I'm not sure just yet, but I think if you give Ricky and Brockman and Djokovic and all these other guys enough pieces around them, and they might be all right. They might be all right.
Okay, and Gregish was traded from Nashville to Minnesota for $75,000 in GAM plus a second-round super draft pick. So so a 2 and $75,000 in GAM. Nashville sends Gregish back to Minnesota. So that's
did Bill Belichick architect that deal?
I mean, it's that's a funky one. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard of a second round pick being discussed in any deal. It's always been like a number one pick in some kind of AM. I've never heard of a second round pick being a part of any kind of a deal when it comes to Major League Soccer. Last question for Niko goes to Nick.
All right. So Niko, we're closing down. We're past the All-Star break. We're past the transfer window. Some names are going to be announced here. Who are your dark horses to close out the season?
Ooh, dark horses to close out the season. That's a good one. I'm going to go with the easy one on the west side, and while you hopefully bring me along here, and I'm going to go with Portland.
West side?
I feel like they've struggled. You didn't quite know if Gio was going to be able to save what he had done so far. There were some doubts about his tactics. There were some doubts about the roster build and if he was going to get any help. And again, I think he really did. This is a team with another very good core. And anytime that you got Diego Charao on the field, just like those greats that continue to get better with time and that are leaders on the field, you can go anywhere because you're going to have balance. That midfield strong, the holding midfield strong. They seem to have added a lot of talent, a lot of speed. Can you convert it into goals? We'll see. But I think Evander's coming out of his shell. He's found the right position with this group. So I'm going to call him a dark horse simply because we were doubting this team for a little bit. And on the east side, that's where I have my doubts because it's been such a freeway in terms of teams on the east. Like the good are good and the bad are bad. So I guess I'll go with the easy one and go Inter Miami. That could be that dark horse. I mean, I was very surprised with the U22 initiative players, man. I mean, Facundo Farias, now I'm starting to hear some other players within the league say, I don't think he's as good as you're putting him out to be. But everything I've heard from Argentina is that this guy is going to be a stud and that he's fast, that he could do absolutely everything, that he's going to play perfectly right next to Messi. Gomez, I think, is another very good depth piece. I'm continuing to see a lot of growth within that team in general. Gregory's supposed to be back, and now you're able to put Busquets on the field with a dog behind him that's just going to be able to cover space, disrupt, get yellows whenever you need to hack a shack. I mean, this is a guy that I'm very high on. I've been high on, and unfortunately he got hurt. But now that Gregory's back, and all these pieces are kind of coming together. Maybe Inter Miami could be a dark horse back there.
All right.
Before we go, I gotta get Niko's take on this, because last night an observation was that Jordi Alba, because you talked about those U22 players on Miami's roster. It looked like Jordi Alba was like the parental chaperone on a field trip, sitting on the bench. Clearly the one older guy amongst like the daycare of children sitting around him.
Yeah, no, I see that, and so does Busquets. When Busquets, like, whose uncle's in there? Like, what? Oh no, it's Sergio. Yeah, I mean, it really is interesting the way this kind of things all come together. Now, it would be, I don't know, surreal to think that Miami would do enough throughout these next 10 games to get into the playoffs. It'd probably be the best comeback in MLS history, to be quite frank. I mean, with 10 games and they're dead last in the East, it's going to be complicated. But if there's going to be a dark horse and a Cinderella story, it's probably going to be that one.
Well, but at the same time, if I remember my math, all Miami has to do is win 2 games, and they're in CONCACAF Champions League. All they've got to do is win Open Cup.
Oh, yeah.
They beat Cincinnati on August 23rd. Then they play the winner of Houston and RSL, and that's on September 27th. So all they've got to do is win 2 games, and they're in CONCACAF Champions League, which is what Jorge _Mas on the 280 character app. That's what he's hunting for.
No, and yeah, don't get me wrong. That's going to be the main objective. I mean, it's Open Cup, Leagues Cup, and then MLS play. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Not because Leagues Cup is not important, but because it's going to be a lot harder to win this one than the one that you got 2 games to go. So you're hoping that you could be in Cincinnati and get into the final, and you go to CCL, you put yourself in the race again with all these, Mexican teams, and maybe get to a Club World Cup with the new format. So yeah, man, I mean, it's really the only objective for this team. So in terms of Cinderella, yes, Miami might not want to go for that, but I think they're the one team that's going to do it. New York City is 13, so you could call them a black horse as well, a dark horse. But I don't know if with all that talent you do, they switched up a lot of pieces. Toronto's a team that I wouldn't ever bet on. Charlotte didn't do enough in this offseason to get me to believe or switch my vote. So Inter Miami is the only one that kind of makes sense, man.
All right. So cut the promo for me. What's going on at Pulso Sports on the Soccer Bar?
All right. Well, we're going to finally be back in Soccer Bar next Monday. Our producer and founder of Soccer Bar had some family emergency in Argentina. He's still there. So we've kind of held that down. So we're going to be back on Monday. In Pulso Sports, you're going to be able to find Brian Smetzer talking this week about, I'm not in the hot seat. He laughed at the question. Laughed when we asked if he was in the hot seat, regardless of being eliminated, bounced out. And honestly, it is kind of laughable. It is laughable at this point. I think it's too early. I talked about it being circumstantial. Talked about Christian Roldan might not be back anytime soon because of the concussion protocol. That's his second one. They're going to be very careful with him. So that one's to be determined. Fry being back. So all of that you can find it at Pulso Sports. We also had a really good talk with Alex Roldan that you can find right there. And then today we'll be going to practice and maybe get you a good exclusive. So check out Pulso Sports.